How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, here on November 19th, 2024. Week 11 is now in the books, and we're here to talk about it in its totality. Last night we had Monday Night Football, and quite literally, the sky is falling on the Cowboys and in Jerry World. Another disappointing defeat at home is worth talking about just based on the history the Cowboys have made and predicting that it's only going to get worse before it gets better, in all honesty, for the Cowboys. Then, just up the street from where I'm living at right now, the New York Giants make a quarterback change. They're benching Daniel Jones in favor of Tommy DeVito. We'll go into that and just recapping basically how we even got here for the New York Giants, plus also discussing the entertaining game in the NFC North between the Bears and the Green Bay Packers. A lot of questionable decisions and some optimism, but also a lot more negatives by the Chicago Bears in that game that we're going to get to on today's show. So make sure to stick around and stay to the end of today's episode. But also, as a reminder before we get started, if you guys have any questions, comments, or any opinions you'd like to share and just getting involved with the show, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input is always a big part of what makes this show great, and we always thrive on your energy and insights to add a little bit something extra to these shows. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on today's episode, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we would rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show just by clicking the $ and using the new Super Chat feature to get involved with the show today. But we are now able to move on and start off with what we saw yesterday between the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. A battle in Texas between these two franchises. And, Houston get back on track last night basically by defeating the Dallas Cowboys 34-10 in a Monday Night Football showdown. The Texans put an end to C.J. Stroud's second only losing streak of his young career and improved to 7-4, still on top of the AFC South. And Dallas, on the other hand, lose their fifth straight game in a row and fall to 3-7. This is Dallas's sixth straight home loss, going back to last season's playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers. And you tack that onto them not winning a game so far. They are 0-6 at home since that playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers. Still no wins at AT&T Stadium. But more on the game and how it all kind of played out. Houston never trailed in this game. We predicted they were going to make life hard on themselves for them to basically lose this game. They had to really try hard for the Cowboys to have a genuine possibility for them to win. And Houston, just showed their dominance from the word go and pretty much throughout. There were some spotty moments, but for the most part, the Texans showed and, just proved to everybody that they are a better team. And to that point, Dallas now, talking about that history that they made, unwanted history, they're the first team in NFL history to trail by at least 20 points in 6 consecutive home games. And, it is a little bit odd just considering where the Cowboys are right now. They're obviously not a very good team, but still, it is just a little bit on the rarer side that the home games is really where they struggle. They put up better performances on the road, but for some reason at home, it's not clicking for whatever reason, just adding more insult to injury. And also, the Cowboys are in the middle of their longest losing streak since they had a 7-game losing streak back in 2015. If I were a betting man, I would probably guess that they break that record as well, considering that they've lost 5 games in a row now, and I don't think they're going to win next week or many games after this. So that could be something else, some more unwanted history that the Cowboys make as well. But also, it only gets a little bit worse, unfortunately. Like we mentioned before, if this wasn't already bad enough, during last night's game, Dallas also suffered injuries to their starting tight end, Jake Ferguson, their right guard, Zach Martin, and their left guard, Tyler Smith. Zach Martin and Tyler Smith left the game with ankle injuries, and Jake Ferguson suffered a concussion. All of them did not return in yesterday's game. So it's a little bit. I'm starting to feel a little bit bad for them. We poke fun at the Cowboys here or there, but the injuries, the home losing streak, and everything like that, it is a running joke, and a lot of people, I'm sure, like making fun of it more than I do. But I do a little bit now feel a bit for the Cowboys because every way they turn, nothing is turning out in their favor. But more on the performances, C.J. Stroud had a decent game. He didn't throw a touchdown, but that was more so to do with Joe Mixon taking over the game rather than C.J. Stroud not playing very well. He did throw an interception, but he threw for also 257 yards. Joe Mixon, like I said, continues his low-key offensive player of the year performance this year. I mean, no one's really going to consider him a major candidate, but he scored 3 touchdowns last night, another game over 100 yards, 20 carries. I mentioned 3 touchdowns. That brings him to a total of 10 so far this year. And if it wasn't for that ankle injury, who knows where these numbers would have been. But, he's still making a great case, I believe, for Offensive Player of the Year. But, it's hard to compete with Derek and Saquon, obviously. But also on that note, it's funny how we talked about the running backs and nobody really wanting to take a chance on them. But Joe Mixon, Saquon, and Derrick Henry are all, in my opinion, the top 3 players for Offensive Player of the Year. All of them running backs. So a little bit ironic on how the off-season kind of worked out for these teams kind of being hesitant to offer these running backs long-term contracts. Look where they are now. So looking at also the Houston Texans on the receiving side, Nico Collins came back and he led the receivers with 54 yards and 4 receptions. Again, not a crazy passing game for them last night, so they didn't really have any outstanding performances. I mean, Nico could have had a better game numbers-wise if they would have counted that 77-yard screen, but unfortunately they ruled it off. But still, the Texans coasted to a victory. And on the other side, I mean, Cooper Rush threw for 354 yards, but he was sacked 5 times, threw an interception. He fumbled twice. He recovered one of them, but it was weird because he fumbled twice. He recovered one, but the other one technically was recovered by Tyler Guyton, and then he fumbled. It was all a big mess. I'm sure you guys saw that play and how just ridiculous and just comical it was. Just the epitome of what this Cowboys season has been so far. But regardless of that, no real standouts in the running game. They were passing the entire time, trying to catch up. CeeDee Lamb, a solid game, 93 yards and 8 receptions, but it certainly didn't feel like that at all. And overall, I mean, the Texans just dominated this game again, like from the word go. They didn't win the turnover battle, though. The Cowboys actually won, or actually they did win the turnover battle, 2-1. But I mean, the way that this game sort of broke down in its totality, looking at it, Houston had that touchdown called back by Nico, like I said, but they still scored on that first drive. Joe Mixon punched it in to lead 7-0. Then Dallas tried that fake punt that fooled nobody because Houston was ready for it. They dropped John Mechie down into the middle of the field, and as soon as the guy touched the ball on the catch, John Mechie just laid him out, and it looked pretty dumb from that standpoint. Then after that play, both teams actually exchanged interceptions. Then after that, both of them scored touchdowns, and then both of them scored field goals, all back to back to back. And, Dallas missed a field goal late in the first half, so Houston led at halftime 17-10. Then in the second half, the Cowboys pretty much didn't do anything. They were shut out in the second half, much like they were against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, and the Texans went on to score another 17 points to win 34-10. Joe Mixon had all 3 touchdowns in this game. Dallas now, in this game, went 0 for 4 on 4th downs. They had 2 turnovers. And, I mean, there's not much to say on the Cowboys football-wise. I mean, everything that's happening to them is kind of just adding insult to injury, just piling on the misery that the Cowboys have had to withstand this season. You have pieces of metal falling from the roof of the stadium. The the fumble by Cooper Rush, recovered by his own offensive lineman. He tries to make a play and run with it. Then he fumbles the ball. It ends up in Derek Barnett's hands, and he runs it back for a touchdown. Just clownery, honestly, in that game last night for the Cowboys. And, I mean, it is what it is now. I mean, at this point, there's not much to really analyze other than everything that's already been said before. If anything, at this point, I would like to see more of Trey Lance, if anything, because in all honesty, I'm not going to watch too many Cowboys games going forward, but if Trey Lance maybe was playing, I think that would be interesting for them, just to see what they got, because they did trade a 4th-round pick for him. So seeing what you have in that, for any potential future scenarios, I don't think you could hurt yourself any more than you already have. But for the Texans side of things, great bounce-back game for them to end this mini losing streak that they were in. Nico Collins came back, and it's going to take a bit more time for him to get accustomed to everything and kind of get back up to speed. But he looked okay for the most part. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that slowly this Texans team, for all the hype around them in the passing game with Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico, heading into this year, I think it's slowly starting to become Joe Mixon's team. I think offensively it makes them more balanced. He looks unstoppable when they really commit to the run, and whenever he's, bursting out with these huge runs, scoring touchdowns, it seems like every game. I think it makes him a bit more dangerous. It limits some of the potential risk you do have when you overdo it with the passing game. And looking at the big picture, all the teams considered the top teams in the AFC, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Ravens, all of those teams run the ball and have great running backs. We mentioned Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, James Cook, Derrick Henry, obviously, Najee, Jalen Warren. All those teams really identify with the running game. And if Houston's able to do the same thing with Joe Mixon, I think they'll be right in there with the mix with all those teams in the AFC. But a big win for them to kind of get back on track here, and not too much to say on the Cowboys other than, again, what's already been said. So we're not going to go too far off of that. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about a fellow NFC East team in the New York Giants changing over to Tommy DeVito as their starting quarterback for the rest of 2024. What does that say about Daniel Jones? What does this say about the organization? We got all those answers when we return after this break.